Kia koutou ki runga I te screen, te pakitara, tēnā koutou katoa. Tuatahi te karakia matua Mike, me huatu te rākau ki a koe. Would you please open us with a karakia?
Tautoko, te mihi kia koutou, ngā kaimahi noho mai ki muri, me ngā memo tēnei komiti no reira, tēnā no tātou. He karakia, he pā. Ka huri mātou ki a koe tēnei ahia, he mana ki tia I a mātou. He kō rero mō ngā mea ki rungi te kaupapa, te tai ao. No reira e pā, o mai te kaha ki a mātou, ko te rere ke o ngā whakaaro ki tētehi ki tētehi. Ko te mea nui, te tai ao, me te kotahitana o te tangata. Engari tēnei wā, ka huri o mātou whakaaro ki te whānau pani o huata, I te wehinga atu o tō mātou, o rātou taona, tauni, me ngā aito hua o te motu, haere atu koutou ki rungi tō mātou aroha. O reira e pā, tēnei te mea atu. Amen.
Amen. Kia ora, tēnā koe matua. He kanohi hau kei Wainganui a tātou I tēnei komiti. Nā reira me mihi ki a koe mana. Nau mai, haere mai, ki tēnei komiti o the RPC. Te tangata o Ngāti Hineuru, te tiamana o Ngāti Hineuru, tēnā koe. And if we could do a whakawhanaunga for mana, ko wai koe, and what pōtai you are wearing when it comes to this committee of the RPC. So me whātu te rākau ki a koe mana.
Au, tēnei te no whakaiti nei te mihi atu ana kia koutou e te komiti whakaare. Pau, te ringa refe o Matukarauna, tarangi nei. So neira anō te mihi atu, ko mana Hazel tōku ingoa, te hia mana o Ngāti Hineuru iwi, e mihi ana kia koutou. Kia ora.
Kia ora mana. Niki Kirikiri, I'm here on behalf of Ngāti Ruapani ki Waikare Moana. Kia ora.
Ua, tēnā koe, ki kuaia, koe anō tōku pōtai I rangi nei, ko te kai kaunihira o te Māui ki te tonga.
Kia ora, Mike Mohi talking ingoa. I'm representing Te Whare Toa on the request of the Ariki Tumutu Heru. There's only 8 ratepayers in the area that I think, but something like 35,000 cows. So quite important when you look at it from that point of view. I'm also the original Kaitakawaina for a group called Ngā Whenua Rāhui, which is the Māori equivalent of QE2. And there isn't a Rohe representative here that hasn't got a kawanata or a covenant over part of their land. So just for your information, kia ora.
Kia ora mana, I'm Sophie Sears, I'm one of the Hawke's Bay Regional Councillors constituency here at Tonga.
Tēnā koe mana, nā mihi awe e ho, nui o ki ko waiak.
Tēnā koe te whanaunga, nau māhere I te RPC, ko Laura Kāmai tōku ingoa no Tamati Pōpai Whenua.
Kia ora, Jock McIntosh. Like Sophie and Zan, I represent the people of Hiri-Taonga.
Tēnā koe, mana. Zan Harding, as he's pointed out, also a councillor for Hastings Hiri-Taonga.
Kia ora koutou, ko Martin Williams tapu ingoa, ko e te tahi o ngā kai kaunahira, no Ahareria hau.
Kia ora, Martin. We'll go to the screen. Kia ora, Teresa.
Kia ora.
Boy, that's Teresa. Down the road, Pāhoi Wera. Ka pai. Oh, kia ora, Karaina, you've joined us. Oh, both of you.
Yes.
Ka pai. Kia ora, Will.
Kia ora, Chair and everyone. Will Foley, Councillor Tamatea, Central Hawke's Bay.
Ka pai. Kia ora, Michelle.
Kia ora, mana e te rangatira. Michelle McRoy, representative Tātou Tawairo.
Kia ora, Jenny.
Kia koe. E te rangatira, kura mai tātou e pai nei, neka te menu kia koutou. Jenny Nelson Smith, tamatia pōkai whenua. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And Tanya Hopmans. Kia ora.
Tēnā anō koe, mana, and I'm wearing the pōtai of co-chair of this committee with Henua.
Ka pai, kia ora. Mana, would you like to stay with us or?
Yeah.
Ka pai.
Yep.
Awesome.
But
We've got two of you. Kia ora. Watu. Okay, ka pai. Awesome. Tēnā tātou katoa. We'll kick into our agenda. Apologies we have received from Councillor Van Dyke, Tanya Eden on behalf of Mana Ahuriri. And I've been told that Michelle, you need to leave at 3 and Teresa at 2:30. Ka pai, we will probably be finished by then anyway. Ka pai. So I'm happy to move those apologies in a second, please. Thank you, Laura. All those who agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora tātou. Are there any conflict of interest to declare for today's meeting? Kaore, there are none. Aroha mai whana, I have to do a bit of housekeeping. So this meeting is being live streamed on Council Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on our YouTube channel. In the event of an earthquake, drop cover and hold. If the shaking is long or strong, when shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed immediately towards Napier Hill, along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, continuing up the steps to Cameron Road. If an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exits and proceed to the assembly area on the grass at the corner of Dalton and Voltaire Streets. Emergency exits are clearly signposted. Wharepaku are located down the hall to the right out of the chamber entrance. If we turn to item 3, the confirmation of minutes from the RPC meeting on the 18th of September. If you were present at that meeting, can you please move and have a seconder for true and accurate record of the meeting minutes, unless there are any corrections to be made? No corrections to be made. A mover, please, if you were in attendance. Thank you, Nikki. And a seconder. Need a second. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Apai, so Katrina, kia ora, and te wairama, and apologies from Nick, he's in Wellington today. You will lead us through our decision item. Kia ora.
I'm actually, through you, Chair, going to ask both Nicola Nicholson, the Manager of Policy, and Belinda, Team Leader Policy, to come up and talk to you through the paper, please.
Tanya, we have Ricky join us today. Are you aware? Yep.
Kia ora koutou, not a formal apology, but Di Smith had hoped to be here from Tamatia Pōkai Whenua, but she is busy with a whale stranding at Clive, I believe. So, so that was an update from her. I think I know everyone, so I won't introduce myself again. And I'm sure most of you know Belinda from the policy team as well. What we might do is just run through some of the slides that I've put together just to give a bit more of a background to this paper and how we've got to that point.
Yes.
And then we can take questions and have a bit of a discussion.
Fantastic.
Perfect. So just to probably take a step back before we go forward, in 2022, the first phase of the Kotahi Engagement Plan began. It's was broken into 3 different phases. First phase was that listening phase, that was what encapsulated all of the engagement work that we were planning on doing. And then phase 2, which was moving into 2023, was about creating the plan, starting to put together the body of the work, and then phase 3 was that delivery. So in 2022, we held a number of community drop-in sessions around the region. I think some of you might have attended those. They were a really rich source of engagement from the community. We also saw the formation of a technical advisory group that was made up of lots of industry, people like Waka Kotahi, NGOs, all of Forest and Bird, everyone like that. So it's a really a good mix of those groups across the region. We also had a period of focused inter-council collaboration with our TLAs. We did some online consultation, so we did that through our social media. We also did it on the Social Pinpoint platform, and that was really successful as well. So that was the first time we'd ever used one of those tools, and we got some really great feedback through that. And we also did some targeted workshops with the RPC as well. So then obviously the cyclone happened, and that kind of put us in a pause state for about a year there while we were in the recovery work. What we did do as a team post-cyclone was go through a phase of doing the analysis of the engagement that we had done pre-cyclone, just to see if what we heard was still feeling right, if there was any major shifts from kind of what we had come through. And to be honest, there wasn't, but what it did do, it strengthened really the themes that we'd heard around climate resilience and natural hazard management. They were already 2 topics that were forefront for our community already prior to the cyclone. So that was a piece of work we did. One of the other things that happened post that period was we also had the findings from the HBIFR. There was one of the recommendations, I think there were 3 recommendations. Sorry. The Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review, and there was a suite of recommendations in there around the regional policy statement, its age, the fact that it needs updating urgently, and the decision-making framework around that. The other thing that also happened was the new government brought in a temporary pause for the notification of freshwater plans. So that means that we are unable to notify any freshwater plans until the 31st of December this year, or until there is a new MPSFM brought in, so whichever sooner. That doesn't stop us doing work on freshwater plans, just to be clear. It just means that we can't publicly notify them. So to date, we have continued working in that space, and that has been the visions and values work that we've been doing with the PSGEs, and that work continues on. So all of that being said, we had done that initial engagement, we'd had all of these changes, and we got to a point where we needed to update our engagement framework. So that is what has formed the basis of the paper that's in front of you. Also, while we were developing the framework, we were giving consideration to the fact that we're going to have an election shadow this year, and trying to figure out how we could best use the time to make sure that we don't lose momentum on this important project during that period. All of the work that we've previously started continues on in the framework that's in front of you. Probably one of the things that is maybe new or has been brought into focus as we move through this process is a pre-notification draft. So that's a RMA term or planning term, so I thought I'd just explain that a little bit. So a pre-notification draft of the RMA plan, which is the Kotahi RPS that we're talking about, is just really an early informal copy of the plan that's shared before we get into that formal process. So doesn't need to be a full draft. It can easily work to identify issues and then have a series of different policy directions and look for feedback from the community for that. So it works to help socialise the plan with the broader audience and the community, but also gives us an early steer as to are we heading in the right direction? Is our community thinking something different, and what changes could we possibly need? So that talks to that point about, gives us an opportunity to refine the plan before we get into this really structured RMA process. So we're more nimble and agile and able to respond in that place. It's not legally required, but it's a standard practice, and it's good practice to do that prior to the formal notification. So in the framework that we've got, this is kind of a rough proposed timeline, so working through until July, continuing in the JTOG space with the policy team working with PSGEs to help draft their RPS, further updates and workshops to keep the RPC members involved in this development. Moving into that August space, there's quite a big window there for notification, so we're talking kind of between August and February, and that speaks to the depth of the engagement that we want to do. This isn't kind of just go up for 2 weeks, so we really want to get across the region, and we talk there about all the people that we would like to engage with. The PSGEs continue meeting with the hapu as they've done so far, and the drop-in sessions, hui focus groups, rural groups, community groups, all of those things working to get that feedback. Also working with the JTOG and TLAs and the consent staff to get review early as well, so to make sure that it's a practical, workable document that's going to deliver what we are looking for. And then moving into March, we'd be looking to the RPC to bring a final draft to the RPC so that it could be approved for notification. Prior to that, it's shared with iwi authorities, and that's part of the RMA that we need to do that. And once we've got that approval of the final draft from RPC, it can then be notified. So that's roughly where we are. That August date was just to try and allow the team to keep working with the engagement while we're in that election shadow and keep things moving. So the next steps for us are that continued engagement with the JTOG, the RPC, mana whenua, PSGEs, TLAs, industry and stakeholders. Decision from today will enable us to build a work program around this, so it lets us set up our year so we know what we're going to do going forward. And also would appreciate feedback on how the RPC would like to be involved in this process going forward. So we had some really positive feedback, thank you, about the workshops. We really enjoyed those as well. But the frequency, how you'd like to do those, etc. So the paper speaks to the 4 options. This was also informed with the conversation we had with the PSG TAO staff through the JTOG. Option 1 in the paper is to approve the engagement framework as prepared with that potential August date for a pre-draft notification. Option 2 would be to approve the framework with an amendment to that date. Option 3 is probably a more targeted approach, and that would be to, for this first part of the work, to look to limit the scope to focus on natural hazards and the associated topics that are so interwoven with it that it would be hard to do them independently. So it would be natural hazards, climate change, energy, infrastructure and transport, and urban form and development would be our suggestion. And then option 4 would be obviously the do nothing approach, which is not to approve the engagement framework. All of this to say that I don't think we would stop any of the work going. It would be just about bringing forward the climate change work and the natural hazards work and staging it in that process. And that's the end. So happy to take questions or anything Katrina or Belinda want to add.
Nicola, can you just go back one slide? Thanks. And so the staff's preferred option is option 1.
Yeah.
And could you just talk to us around why option 1?
That's currently the trajectory that we are on, and that's always kind of been a bit of a premise of looking at kotahi and the environment as a whole. However, that was before the government put us on a different timeline with freshwater, so we've kind of had that happen anyway.
Yeah. So, and also through you, Chair, the plan is 30 years old.
Yeah.
So we are essentially 20 years behind time in having a review of that plan. Went to review it after 10. So it is incredibly old, outdated, and we can't carry on with the plan as it is. But there is that complication around freshwater, and we can work with that. There is always going to be complications around legislative change. It is never stable. It doesn't stay still, and so we could wait forever for RMA reform, but that wouldn't be our suggestion.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to Ricky now, who is our tangata whenua rep advisor. Just to add on to what's been discussed so far, Ricky, in option 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I support what Nicola and Katrina have just said. I think option 1 is the sensible place to start. It does come with the rider, I guess. There's a huge amount of work to be done between now and getting that stuff ready to go out for consultation. I think that's the unknown, I guess, is how we can do that, how can we make that stuff happen in between now and August? It's a big task. We've talked about that with the tangata whenua reps this morning, about getting some of that work done. We need to move beyond just identifying the issues, which I think we did in the workshops last year quite well. But what is the next step beyond that? And that's the question. I think it's sort of hovering above us all right now. But I agree with Katrina, we need to do something. The legislative framework is unstable at best at the moment, but it's never going to be any better probably in the next little while either, so we're just going to move on, I think. But yeah, I agree with Nicola and Katrina's comments, so supportive of option 1.
Thank you, Ricky. We'll open it up to members. Kia ora, Laura.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, team. It was an incredible, it was great attending the workshops with you all last year, and I did enjoy being able to feed in that way, and to share each other's thoughts was fantastic around where you've got to at this point, and thank you for finally listening to the tangata whenua RPC members. I've just got a point of clarification, and I did ask you fellas last week, but the RMA relationship notification, is that just a normal process for your feedback, from the RMA notification? How would you manage that? Your RMA relationship.
So in terms of the Schedule 1 process, is that what you mean with the iwi authorities?
Yes.
Did you? No, okay. So we would be doing a lot of pre-engagement early. We would not expect that to be the first time that people had heard or seen what was going on. But we do have it's like an obligation under the RMA to make sure that we have done that specifically. Am I answering your question? Sorry.
So the team have been working for quite some time now with the JTOG group.
Yeah.
We've got contracts in place with each of the PSGs.
Yeah.
So that work has been going for quite some time. There's quite a lot of work been going on with territorial local authority partners and with industry groups. So there's all these programs that have been going on as we've been building or developing thoughts and ideas, and coming to RPC with those workshops was part of that process.
Okay.
That will continue,
right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
And we want the JTOG and the staff to do a lot of heavy lifting. Our initial ideas is that we would continue workshopping with the RPC as a result of that work from the JTOG, but happy to be guided by you on that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of our Schedule 1 process, there's lots of members of our community that aren't part of industry groups, tangata whenua groups or TLA, that haven't had any sort of involvement other than the community-based workshops 2 years ago. And so the pre-notification draft that's not part of that Schedule 1 process is really important to then reintroduce that to the wider community and get them back into the process of thinking about it. Because we can always sit here and we think that, yes, we're doing all this work and we know what's happening, but actually when you go and talk to Joe at the community hall, they've got no idea. So that's part of the reason of doing a pre-notification consultation process.
Kia ora.
Have I answered any of your questions?
Yes, but you know me, I'll just hound you later.
I was just going to add as well, it doesn't change the obligation when you get to the draft stage that it does go out to all the iwi authorities as well. So I'm not sure if that's that step has to happen regardless.
Yeah, it had to play. It should be solid by the time the pre-notification gets out.
That's right.
Kia ora. Sophie.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I suppose it's a bit of a question for the team and probably for RPC members too. And thank you. I enjoyed those workshops so much. You know, we talk so much about starting without all the preconceived ideas. Brown paper bag business. We talked about it at Hastings yesterday. But we really got brown paper with nothing on it. Which it was amazing. And I know that RPC members, many could only get to some of them, not all of them, that we captured only what we could through the 6 of the different people that were here. So a big question for me is we do a lot of this work, and like I say, I think this was some of the best work I've seen in regional council. I enjoyed it so much. And then we also go out to the community, and then we also hear all the time, no one talked to me about it, I didn't know about it. I hear that in our communities, Pākehā, Māori, Mana Whenua, marae, one particular marae, never heard a word about it. I hear it all the time. What I'd like to know is how the RPC members feed this back to right down to marae level. Is that their job, or will this process capture, particularly at place, people who haven't been fed back to in different ways, and will there be opportunities there for them to input in the same way? Or by the time we get to pre-engagement, are we already past the new stuff? So it's a sort of question to staff, but also a question to RPC members about how they feel about their way of getting right down the chain.
Okay, I might direct firstly to Tanya Hopman, is the co-chair, around the PSGE question.
Yes.
Yeah. To start with, and then I'll go to staff around how we capture the whole community, including to marae level.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Tanya.
Kia ora. Thanks, Sophie, for your question. You raised a question which hits on an issue that we were discussing amongst some of the RPC Tangata Whenua members this morning. First of all, formally, it's not the role of Tangata Whenua members of the RPC to undertake consultation. So that's not our role. Our role is to be governance. However, we're obviously very vested in ensuring that there is good engagement, just as you are as councillors with your own constituencies. The issue we raised and discussed this morning was just around, while I think everyone appreciates this is really important and urgent, it's long overdue as has been said, it is only 5 months, and there are, I've lost count, but somewhere between 9 and 12 kaupapa, which are all quite significant, and which we talked about, some of the issues relating to each of those kaupapa at the workshops. So the concern I have is that the JTOG comprises some of our staff from PSGEs who are also very new. And so while they might have skills in terms of resource management and planning, a lot of them are still coming up to speed with understanding the marae and hapu views on kaupapa. And we've been focused on freshwater, but there are so many more topics in this, RPS that we're going to have to deal with. So I do have a concern around engagement from the JTOG perspective, ensuring that they've got time in terms of the technical advisors for PSGEs to actually even talk to whānau about this. I actually can't see how it will happen with all these many topics in 5 months, and also how that gets resourced. So I have that issue. So I think there is a tension here with wanting to get something done, and then actually making sure, at least in the upfront part, before we notify anything publicly, that tangata whenua groups have got the time to ask our own people about the issues, because we haven't been focused on all these many issues. We've been focused on fresh water, which is what we all thought we were tracking towards initially as a focus. So it is a concern in terms of getting that feedback early to help inform the drafting of the plan, I believe. But Nicola might have some brilliant ideas I'm not aware of how that's going to happen well at the JTOG level, because I think that's going to help inform ourselves as governors. Yeah. Sorry, Sophie, I'm not sure if I've actually answered your question or just told you what I'm worried about, but I'm concerned about.
Kapa, thank you, Tanya. And Nicola, just hand it over to you, because I see the JTOG as a key component to how engagement happens timely to the right areas and allow for feedback, while also keeping governors appraised and engaged through these workshops that you are you're putting on the table for us to consider.
Yeah, so absolutely hear your points, Tanya, and those concerns. It is a tight timeline, but we have been at this since 2022, and we do need to keep moving. In that August date, there is some flexibility around it, but it really serves the purpose of setting up a work program for this year. One of the things that I would say was that when we went out with the visions and values contracts, which although their genesis was in the NPSFM and the freshwater space, we made them purposely broad enough so that each PSGE could choose to do what they or deliver that contract how they wished. Now, for a number of the PSGEs, what they've chosen to do is, as they've done that work, they haven't just engaged on freshwater, they've engaged on the Taio more broadly. So actually, for a number of the PSGEs, there's already a bulk of work already sitting there that they've undertaken, so they're not starting from scratch on these other topics, but also completely agree that that's not the whole package, but just that there is already some preliminary work. And then to go back to one of my earlier slides when we were saying a pre-notification draft does not need to be a full and final copy draft of every single provisions. It can kind of work more like engagement that you might do on a long-term plan, when you kind of say, this is the issue, these are the options that we're looking at, tell us which one you prefer. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that full polished version. It's still much a very living document, live document at that stage. And that's probably a little bit where that option 3 could also help with, that you're chunking the entirety down into sections, and that might allow that energy within the next 5 months to be on those topics, and that could help with that engagement. But as for engagement, it is sometimes we've found that it's not until there's something on the paper that people engage, because having a conversation about a blank piece of paper can sometimes be a little bit hard. So there's balances in there.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there further questions to the team? Councillor Williams. Kia ora.
Yeah, I've thinking a few things through. The first one is that the independent panel recommended we proceed with urgency, really around directing where future growth should go and what we do about existing areas, which has been a really fraught issue, not least for Tangata Whenua and Mana Whenua. So if we proceed with option 1, that's not to say that what we notify won't be addressing those issues that would be focused on option 3. It's not like to the
exclusion. It would be everything, yeah.
So option 3 is more to do that to the exclusion of everything else, right?
Yeah, or to
just focus on that.
To just focus on what's in chapter 3, and then everything else would be on a slower timeline behind it. So you'd be bringing that climate change, energy, infrastructure, transport, urban form and development, and natural hazards forward as a priority.
Right. Okay. The workshops that Sophie talked about and the notes cover quite a bit of stuff on fresh water.
Yeah.
are we saying we wouldn't do anything on freshwater?
No, I think we would continue to work on it, but because we're bound by that notification deadline, we can't notify it. So it ends up being on a slower.
I was wondering about that, and it may just be a workaround, but and I appreciate there's a heck of a lot of sensitivity, for want of a better word, around tank, change 9. It says you can't notify freshwater planning instrument that would give effect to the NPSFM. It doesn't say you can't notify a regional policy statement that addresses freshwater in the way that your region would like. Does it?
Chair, I think the decision out of Otago actually says it would have us unable to do that. We can get some legal advice, but I'm fairly certain that if we were to notify an RPS that included freshwater provisions, we would be told quite firmly to stop. Otago Regional Council had provisions in their RPS that were tenuously freshwater, told to take them out.
Yeah, but theirs was the other way around, of course, wasn't it? Because they tried to put all the other stuff through the fast track process and call it freshwater. I'm sort of thinking of whether there's some ability to progress a high level, vision, objectives and values which would become objectives, so that we don't lose momentum on some of the conversation around freshwater. Well, it may just be sensible to pause the whole thing, but I'm just testing that a little bit.
Through you, Chair, I think there's another side to that also, Councillor Williams, is that actually by the time we get to August, we're actually probably going to have a fairly good idea where MFE's going on freshwater anyway.
Yeah, there'll be the new one coming out now.
So I think by that point, the team might well be in the background still progressing work, because we're not going to be able to differentiate between, we turn up to a community meeting and we say, sorry, we're not going to talk to you about freshwater because we can't. That just doesn't happen, particularly given that we took, a mountains to sea approach, and we intend to continue to do that. By the time we get to August or even February next year, we'll know the direction of our current government.
Yeah, I'm only really pursuing this because everything's so integrated, and the key message of the consultation was everything's connected, right? And sediment was the dominant issue that travels from, it's in the coastal chapter, and sediment gets transported by water. So are we going to get told we can't address sediment because it's travelling by water and it's fresh water? You can see everything's sort of tangled up. That's what I'm trying to seek some clarity on. I'm just asking questions. I don't necessarily expect immediate answers on. But
so is it
seems
feasible?
to be hiving out water is going to leave our plan looking a little bit lonely. Because flood protection, there are exemptions you can get from the minister to address growth in housing or flood hazards and water.
And we could seek an exemption from the minister to proceed with a freshwater plan if we got to that point.
Yeah. Okay. I just wonder what other people think about excising water altogether. That's what I'm interested in.
I'm interested to know where our PSGE partners are at with their vision and value, because this may not be timely, and August is not too far away to know what to do with it next.
So we've got Saul. Did you want to speak to the visions and values that we've received already and we're on track to receive? Sorry, I've just completely put you on the spot. We're actually tracking really well with them. So we've already got the first lot, and we are moving our way through, and we've seen some drafts. So
relatively vague answer. I know that we've received one from Tamatea Pōkai Whenua, so one Visions and Values paper, and we're on track to receive Tātou Tātous in March, and all the rest of them I think are still tracking for early this year. So I can't remember the specific dates, but I know it's this first quarter anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Tanya. Kia ora, Tanya.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, we can
you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Just can I check, just since we just had that discussion, are those vision and values papers that are being received cover all the kaupapa, or are they mostly focused on water?
Predominantly water at the moment because that was the deliverable that we sought. However, the work that sat in behind them has covered more than just water.
Okay, I guess we just need to be cognizant that we may not have, or people might not be prepared as much as we would like them to be able to input into the kaupapa, even the ones they want to. So I just think we need to be cognizant of that. And I had a small question, is it really just an aside, which is actually before that, we definitely, I think we really need more RPC hui, or workshops, whichever is most appropriate, to make sure that our governors are being brought along as the plan is being developed, rather than, having a whole lot of topics in a draft presented to us later in the piece before August. And I'm sure that's not the intention of staff, but I really do think we need lots of workshops to be able to understand these kaupapa. I totally agree with what Martin is saying. It seems strange to be able to divorce some of these topics from each other. So we'll have to see how we go on that. But the little aside I had was really a question around just terminology that's used in the papers that we've been given. And I'm not sure if it's intentional, but I want to check. There's reference to tangata whenua and separately to mana whenua, as if they're two separate groups or different groups. Is that intentional? And if it is, can someone explain to me what's meant by tangata whenua and what's meant by mana whenua?
No, sorry, apologies. That's a slip up from us from the National Planning Standards, which uses either of the terms in place. So that's apologies from me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. I think with setting workshops, once we resolve which option we go with, we'll also resolve to make sure that we have workshops as governors if everyone's agreeable. Okay. Fine. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, I've got a bunch of comments that I could make, but we're in questions at the moment.
Yeah, we're in questions, yeah.
So I won't. So my question is just, it seems to me that the biggest question we've got immediately is the capacity of the JTOC. So how do we go about satisfying that? Our staff need a work plan, and they say you're at a point where you can stretch to doing the whole RPS. And good on that, and I support that. But how do we take from where we are now to have some sort of reasonable confidence? Is there a way that do we need a decision on that, which is essentially second guessing, by the sound of things, the capacity of the JTOC, or is there some way we can sequentially go into this and test that capacity along the way? Because that seems to me the heart of our problem today is, what is that capacity?
And I think it's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario, right? Because until we have some kind of date that we're working towards, we don't know, or we can't kind of, plan for that and figure out what's going on.
So does that really suggest that a sequential approach, or like a provisional, the answer might be option 3, but aspire to option 1, and just feel our way through it over the next month or so?
So through you, Chair, if this committee is of a mind to agree with the date of August, but cautious about the capacity of the JTOC, then the team are going to work with that. And ultimately, that might lead us to the decision that actually option 3 is better. So, so I think first and foremost, I think it's the date. Are we comfortable with an August? And then if there's and working towards option 1, can we do it? No, we can't. We could bring it back to RPC, or we can resolve today that actually option 3's got all those really important bits in it, particularly out of the HBIFR, that we're really passionate about getting underway, and so let's start there. If we find we've got capacity to go forward and do more, we can come back to RPC. That's sort of an approach.
And that's a fairly standard planning approach, and what we've seen Napier City Council do with their district plan, in terms of they notified their plan, but they have done variations to it to introduce chapters that weren't ready at the point of notification. So there is that phased approach, absolutely.
And that doesn't stop you collecting information when you do go out to the community about the freshwater, because you'll get all sorts of information back, but we can focus on those topics and record everything else, which will feed into further development.
Okay, are there any further questions? Aren't any? Well, as I see it, we are going towards an option 1 with an August date. However, bringing back to this committee, I guess, the progress of work, and if timelines do need to be changed, that we can do that.
Absolutely. And I think also if we have that understanding of how the RPC would like to work with us, and we can bring the JTOG into that, then that should be kind of a live discussion. That's the discussion that's happening through that process as well. So it shouldn't be something that anyone's unaware of. Yeah.
Teresa, kia ora, Teresa.
Kia ora. So I'd just like to be clear that our the Mohaka Visions and Values freshwater has been complete for a year now. So we're still sitting in limbo, ready to move on with our Mohaka me Waihua plan change.
So Nicola, can you respond to the barriers as to why we can't move any further at this stage?
So it is moving further. So my understanding from the project team is that they have a planner interpreting that document that they've prepared, or that deliverable, into objectives that will go into the RPS, and so we're just waiting to receive those from the project team.
Martin?
Yeah, just a comment really. I mean, I'm in the hands of the rangatira here in terms of preference and readiness, and Councillor Harding's point about the JTOG capacity, but if it is the case that, as we've been advised, we can't really proceed with a freshwater planning instrument, which I've just looked up would include any objectives or anything that relates to any objectives that give effect to the NPS on freshwater. And is that sort of readiness, Mohaka aside perhaps, is the sensible path forward to proceed with pre-notification consultation on a more holistic thing, including Mohaka and wherever we can get to on freshwater generally, but only notify option 3. Is that more realistic? Because if everything's so connected and we're not really on the freshwater stuff, maybe all we're really doing is working out where we should be, where we shouldn't be, infrastructure and connection between them, and hazards. So I don't know, it's just a thought, but I'm in the hands of the rangatira as to the preference and readiness there, because everything's so tangled up. Maybe that's the way to go.
Yep. Kia ora, Tanya.
One thing.
If I am I understanding you right, Martin, you're suggesting option 3 might be preferred?
Yes, but consult on the broader ambit with what we're ready with. But, you know, with the interface of everything wider than that, to get a comprehensive RPS, which we're not allowed to do, everything's so connected. And also there's a lot going on in Tank, which might inform at the end of the day of this. We've got a new MPSFM. I don't know, it just consult on the full package, perhaps just go hard on the hazard stuff. Meantime, if that's more.
Yeah, sorry. So the more I've heard people talk, the more option 3 looks attractive to me, just from perhaps a feasibility perspective. So my question is if we did go for option 1, Nicola, how soon would you know or be able to advise whether actually we need to just focus on the option 3 topics? Because I'm just thinking about the workload and then, you know, everybody trying to do everything, as opposed to knowing actually sooner rather than later we can only do these 4 or 5 topics and that's what you focus your best energies on. So trying to do some things really well in the short term, then trying to do a lot of things not so well or not as thoroughly, and then finding out we're only going to do 5 of them for August. I'm just teasing that out a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, Tanya, I think what you're saying is right, and it's probably going to take us a couple of months to get that feeling of whether or not we could kind of progress everything. So maybe there is some sense of moving with that option 3 and having that focused approach on that. Whilst saying that, even though we would be looking at developing those 3 topics, a planner's mind and world is always intricately connected with other topics, and so they kind of continue on anyway because you're always thinking about it and dealing with those things. So,
but you'd have that context out in the pre-consultation draft. You just wouldn't formally press the button otherwise.
Absolutely.
Okay. Kia ora, Thompson.
Kia ora, thanks, Chair. Nicola, that's probably a question for everybody. I'm sort of circling back around to the mana whenua, tangata whenua question. And I think it's, the reason why I'm doing that, I think it's really important, and there's an and to my comments. What is it?
So under the national planning standards, the advice that we're given is that it can be either in terms of the term that is used. I would expect that would not be something that my team would determine, but that would be something that either this committee or the council with advice would determine.
Yeah, I think that would be a takeaway, unless we can answer that here today. Getting some definition around that, or are we accepting of the interchangeable terms? I think further to that, I would somewhat refer to the cultural capability framework. It might provide some guidance around that. Otherwise, we take our absolute guidance from our PSUs, our members at the table.
Yep. There are sections within the RPS that refer to either tangata whenua or mana whenua. Can I suggest as part of our workshopping going forward is that we really define that as a governance group, because it is in the RPS and we want to get it right in there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Support that.
Ricky, kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair. I just wanted to comment on quickly on the definitive comments around the capacity of the JTOG to be able to do the work. I think, particularly from the PSGE reps on the JTOG, they're only as good as the back support they're going to get from their wider even happy behind them.
Yeah.
So it's not just the people sitting at their table from the PSGs, but most of them are fairly new to that space. They're going to rely heavily on getting feedback and input from mana whenua, tangata whenua, whatever we define that as, the people on the haukainga on the ground, if you like. Because they need that mataura going to come from the haukainga to be able to feed that into the process. They can't rep that space themselves at the moment. They don't have that skill set. That's going to be the biggest barrier, I think, to be able to do that stuff. It's not being able to have those conversations at the table. It's the stuff that happens outside the JTOG meetings to inform the actual meeting themselves.
Kia ora, thank you, Ricky. If we can move on to the recommendations, I think we've mostly landed around option 3 with the understanding of having a broader RPS included in that so that it makes sense and it is integrated. But essentially what we're doing is trying to be pragmatic around what's achievable by August in these first chapters. Why is that clear for committee members? Where we're going there? Okay. Could I have a mover for option 3, please? Thank you, Councillor Harding, and a seconder. Thank you, Tanya. Councillor Harding, would you like to speak any further?
Yes, I would, just briefly. First, I just reflect on a meeting that fellow Hastings councillors and the Ngāroa councillor had with HDC yesterday. And one of the requests that came through there was the urgency to address what's the natural hazards and urban form issues, what are the perceived weaknesses in our current RPS, to give TLAs more teeth, to be more forceful about the way that land is developed in future. So I'm conscious of the urgency around that body of work. I'm highly conscious of the urgency around the climate change work for the region, and I just wanted to flag that we do have a Climate Action Joint Committee, and I'm interested in, and offline we're trying to progress a conversation just to ensure that there's a stronger link between that committee to feed in to the RPS development. So I think that's a valuable thing that the Climate Action Joint Committee can get involved in. And of course, natural hazards generally. So I really support elevating those as a key priority, but working within the capacity of the JTOG, but also recognising, as fellow councillors and other members have pointed out, this is a holistic plan. And I think the more that we can work forward with that frame and the more that we can have on the table, whether we can notify that part of it or not, I think is to the better of the plan. And I guess the other thing, what we're agreeing to here is an engagement framework. Personally, what I'd like to see as a next step quite quickly is a comms and engagement plan. And so that's an externally facing one. We also need to have an agreement over how we want to work, in workshop or whatever as the RPC to stay in connection and feed into the work of the JTOG and staff, but also quickly to see what is our detailed plan for going out to interest groups, the wider community and that sort of thing for that pre-consultation phase. Yeah, and that's my picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Kia ora, Tanya.
No further comments from me,
No
thanks.
further comments. So those have all been picked up and I think are really useful to progress workshops and engagement plan for external communications. Yeah. Right. Are there any other speakers? There are none. Okay, all those who agree on option 3 and the recommendations 1 and 2 included, say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Kia ora. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nicola. And just a huge congratulations, actually, to the JTOG. You probably think it's normal now, but actually it's really progressive the way that you're working with our PSG Kaimahi. So thank you. Kia ora. We move on to our information items. So item 5 is a summary of feedback from our fantastic workshops. So who would like to lead out on this? Kia ora. Come on up. Come on, Saul. Right, we'll hand it over to you, team.
Just waiting for some slides to come out.
Okay, Tanya, can you see the slides? No? Can we share the slides?
Sorry, it might take.
No, we just have to share the screen.
Push the button.
Yep.
There we go. Oh, yep, see them now. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou, everybody. Ko Saul Gudsall tōku ingoa. He kai whakamahere ahau. For those of you who don't know me, Saul Gudsall, I'm a member of the policy and planning team here at HPRC. I have been here before, so I won't speak too much more about myself, but I have a colleague sitting next to me who hasn't, so I'll let her introduce herself before we talk to this information paper.
Kia ora koutou, ko Alex Parkinson tōku ingoa no Te Whanganui a Tara aho, ke Te Matua Maui aho e noho ana. For those who haven't met me yet through JTOG, I'm Alex. I'm relatively new here at Hawke's Bay Regional Council. I started end of October last year, and I was previously working up in Auckland as a resource management solicitor straight out of university, and I've moved down to Hawke's Bay with my partner and his family, and I'm happy to be here. And
But you have connections to the region.
Oh yes, I actually worked at Te Papa Atawhai with Jenny Nelson Smith was my boss back in the day at uni, so she gave me a
Bless
great
you.
bless
For
her.
you.
Gave me a great introduction to the Hawke's Bay and some of the key issues and players here. Thank you, Jenny. But that's me. And that's over to you. So we're just going to provide a summary of the summaries for you, for those who weren't able to make it, and just to give you a bit of an overview of what happened. Over to Saul.
You've summed it up, really, the summary of the summary. So yes, this information item just speaks to those workshops that we had late last year. What we really wanted to say was, firstly, I mean, we've heard it from you all before. We want to say thank you for everyone who came and participated. They were really well attended. They were really productive for us as a policy team, and we got into some really good conversations around all those regional issues across all the domains and topics. And like Alex has said, we're really cognizant that not everyone could attend everything or every workshop, so we just thought we'd come back here to give a sort of a shared understanding of all the key themes that we heard. So we've got obviously the attachment to the paper, which is the sort of full summary, and we've got a few slides that we'll go through now just to touch briefly on some of the key themes that we heard. And then we'll open to any questions. Sorry. I'll start with these three here. So, tangata whenua, mano whenua, we'll work through that. Integrated management and regionally significant issues were all in the first workshop. So these chapters, the first chapter, tangata whenua, mana whenua, provides, just for a bit of context, provides a location for context and process related provisions. And it was made very clear when we sat on that table that mana whenua provisions should not only be found within this chapter, but throughout the whole plan. And there was also some other key themes that around tangata whenua or mana whenua representation, equity, roles and support for rangatiratanga. The integrated management chapter or table, once again, a little bit of context, because sometimes the names can be quite confusing, these national planning standards names. Integrated management is a chapter that looks at cross-topic issues and discusses where any necessary trade-offs need to be made. So this is the chapter where these things sit. And at that table, some of the key themes discussed here were ki uta ki tai approach to planning and a clear hierarchy framework to manage conflicts when we see them. Regionally significant issues, sort of self-explanatory. A big key theme here was spatial planning. That came across on almost every single table. Obviously, I was a timekeeper, so I got to go around and sort of hear every single table, and I heard that so often and saw it written. And one thing that just popped out, I thought there was a key theme about sustainable growth, which talked about balancing population growth, food production, and the environment. And I just thought that was a really kind of cool theme that we see here, but that kind of talks about integrated management, because we have to. There's going to be trade-offs there. So yeah, that was one of I thought a good thing to talk about today.
So rookie mistake, I had my notes on the slide which aren't popping up, so I'm just going to freeball this and give you, it's already all here, and you've got the information paper in front of you, but for AIR, some of the key themes we heard were primarily related to health concerns and creating buffers in residential areas from agri-chemicals and burning of prohibited items. We heard a lot about what we can do to support monitoring mechanisms and using the local community to assist monitoring. And then for the coast, it was quite clear tackling sedimentation was the number one priority that we heard through all of the discussions, understanding parawhenua floodwaters and how they relate to the coast. We heard it was important to go big on restoration of coastal environments and having a Kia ora kitai approach was heard also throughout all of the topics, but particularly for the coast as well. And then for land and freshwater, we had lots of topics discussed actually that came under that kind of broad framework. We had water quality, quantity, beds and banks of rivers, forestry and soil. So it was a huge kind of topic that we broke down. We heard, again, reoccurring themes. One that was quite clear was having equitable decisions and helping communities to transition to more efficient water use. And sedimentation, again, was also another key theme for water quality. I think those are most of the summaries for that. Back to you, Saul. Oh, sorry, I'll carry on here. Climate change, again, was a number one priority. That was loud and clear throughout our discussions. Empowering the community and, again, having equitable decisions when we're helping communities to transition, making, including kind of multi-benefited decisions. So if we can look at nature-based solutions which have multiple benefits while addressing climate change, those were some of the kind of discussions that came out. And then for energy infrastructure and transport and urban form and development, actually, again, spatial planning was brought up a lot. And we discussed quite a bit of how to support behavioural transitions, looking at permissive approaches to low emissions and prohibitive for high emissions. And that was that came through both of those. Again, looking at what we can do to listen to local communities and recognising differences between communities so that we can make equitable decisions, particularly for mana whenua who want to be near their marae and spatial planning and those kind of considerations. So that's kind of what we heard for those.
So like Alex mentioned with spatial planning, biodiversity and ecosystems, Kia ora kitai was also a big key theme that we heard across a whole lot of topics, and that was present within the biodiversity and ecosystems chapter discussion. Protecting and enhancing important biodiversity was big there, and emphasising the relationship that mana whenua have with Indigenous biodiversity in New Zealand and taking into account whenua Māori. Natural hazards, well, we heard loud and clear that natural hazards is a focus area. We've heard it again here today. One key theme was the need for a comprehensive toolbox of regulatory measures to manage risks and ensure compliance. It's written there. Other key themes were planning for managed retreat, effective risk management and education. As we see that they are also important drivers for other chapters, which noting kind of what we were talking about before, Martin, everything's sort of interlinked. So, and it was also made clear, talked about it here today again, that our current RPS is lacking in this space, and that was something that was reflected in the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review. So we're sort of only repeating what we've just heard before in the previous paper. Yeah, that's kind of our short, very brief summary of those slides.
So for the summary of the summaries, we heard loud and clear some key themes across all of the topics that flowed through all of our kōrero during the November workshops. And these are some that we have listed up here on the screen, which is ultimately prioritising the environment from further degradation, prioritising climate change, and focusing on healthy water for our communities to thrive. We had really rich discussions on these days, so this really is a high-level overview of what we heard. And as you read through the summaries, I'm sure a lot of the key themes will jump out at you as well. This really is just an overview to bring our attention back to some of these key themes and issues so that as we're drafting the RPS, it's kind of pertinent in our minds of what we need to think about. So hopefully it was a helpful summary for you all. And yeah, if you have any questions, let us know.
I think I'd just say as well, even the summary, the attachment of the summaries, we have all the post-it notes, so we have everything word for word. So even the summaries, not our summary of the summary today, but the summary that's attached is still a shortened form. So we have everything that was talked about on that day. So other than that, through you, Chair, I'd open up to any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, team. Alex and Saul. Any questions? Nothing missing? Kia ora, Sophie.
Well, kia ora, it's not really a question, as there don't seem to be many. I'll just say I saw those bits of paper and well done, because
It was
shaping it into those was really good. Yeah, it really,
Hundreds
I
of
thought it was
post-it
a great-
notes.
Yeah. Really enjoyed reading them.
Awesome.
I'm not going to lie, there's a great app to
No, you shouldn't have told me.
I did it word for word.
Artificial intelligence, was it? Fantastic, thank you, team. And you've heard how much we've enjoyed the workshops. I think that, we'll have more to continue along our RPS path before August. So if there are no other questions, kia ora, Mike.
Yeah, well, not a question, but just to congratulate you on your attitude to the Māori values. Some 25 plus years ago, when I first came onto the Māori committee, this was a little bit unheard of. The way that you and the staff behind react to Māori issues, and I've been 30 odd years working with a separate committee from to the Minister of Conservation, and therefore I travel around and see a lot of councils, and they put themselves in the corner by excluding tangata whenua, and it's still going on today. And just say, how refreshing it is to see the staff of the Regional Council acting in the way they have. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Mike. Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, just a comment. Again, great job assimilating all of that. Prioritise climate change. I think I made a point which wasn't captured, that I actually think there's something bigger than climate change, and that's biodiversity.
Yeah.
And that if you focus on the intersection set of adaptation and mitigation, you land on biodiversity. The more you enhance the eroding hill slopes through enhanced natives, you promote biodiversity, you increase our climate change resilience, and you promote mitigation. So wetlands are the same. So yeah, to me, actually, biodiversity is the big one. The point I would like to make is the easy bit is that, what you've done there, that was the easy bit, because you've captured all of the issues, everything that's wrong in the world and that we need to focus on fixing. The real trick is how, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's when you get into the how that people start falling apart. Everyone wants world peace. When you talk about how you're going to deliver it, President Trump's got some different ideas and other people have got doing that. So probably a bad example. My plea to you is that you try and make this RPS, which is a statement of objectives and policies rather than a whole bunch of rules, as short and as powerfully worded and as concise as possible. I think that's the same as short. And I've probably not been either concise or short in what I'm saying. Why couldn't this be a 20-page document or a 40-page document with 2 pages on each chapter? An NPS is only 9 pages, and it does a hell of a lot more than this.
That's excellent, because last time you told us we could only write a 10-page one,
yeah,
so we've got double the word count now. So
repeating myself.
He's slipping.
Next time.
By August, we'll.
But it's just the fewer words, the fewer problems, the fewer challenges.
Absolutely.
So make them meaningful and say stuff with them.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora, Thompson.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. Koutou, tēnei ka mihi atu rā ki o koutou. How on earth you managed to try and decipher what I attempted to contribute into that space. Well done. I think there's an emerging equation in a number of conversations, not just here in the sharing that's taken place in the workshops, but the equation kind of looks a lot like nā te ohanga me te tikanga ka puta ko te oranga. I guess thriving marae, thriving hapu. It relates to a moemoeā of or a great vision of no more welfare dependency, because our people, in terms of our marae and our hapu, rely on the mahinga kai and the environment for their existence more than most. So that equation says, the Indigenous economy driven and grounded in absolutely guided principles, the well-being of both the environment and its people will be recognised and be prioritised.
Kia ora. Ataho kupu. Kia ora. If there are no comments or questions, can I have a mover to accept and receive the update? Kia ora, Laura and Martin. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you, team. Kia ora. Kia ora. We move on to item 6, which we have the policy projects update. Who would like to lead us out on this one?
I can.
Nicola.
I will take the paper as read. Probably the only part that I would like to highlight is that there's currently work being done around a bylaw for the flood protection work. So the essence of the bylaw is to make sure that any stock banks, etc., can be protected and that they're maintained in terms of their structural integrity. There is some small overlaps within our current regional resource management plan. So we're going to have to do, once the bylaw is ready, we're going to have to do a very, very, very small plan change to align the RRMP with that bylaw. So that's there's nothing happening currently, but we just wanted to flag that that will progress as the bylaw does as well. And that's probably it, unless there's any questions about specific projects.
Kia ora, Martin.
Sorry, I'm like a little jack in the box today, aren't I?
Sorry.
The MPSHPL.
Yes.
I think we've got until October to notify an RPS that maps every square inch of soil in the region and classifies it. So it's an MPS that's had huge implications, although it's wonderfully important in its conception and intent. Where are we at with it?
I will throw to Gavin, who will be able to give us an update on that.
Go to Gavin.
Sorry, you're getting the whole team up the front today.
I'll swap.
I didn't make it early, money. Very good, Gavin.
Kia ora koutou. Good question. With various spanners in the works thrown from central government resource management amendments and whatnot in recent times, it really does pose a bigger question as to how can we currently or meet the current October 2025 deadline to notify maps of highly productive land across our region. There is some degree of uncertainty around this current government's trajectory around how it defines highly productive land, bearing in mind the NPS for highly productive land was done by the previous government. So there's that ambiguity. But at this point in time, the current government hasn't really shown its hand clearly as to what amendments will or won't eventuate for the highly productive land national policy statement. So if you were to look at the legal requirements on us right now, that October 2025 timeframe stands. We're kind of anticipating that that deadline will shift, but it's a question of how soon will we have the clarity that the deadline is indeed shifting.
Might be taken out.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Through you, Chair, also, Councillor Williams, I've had a number of conversations with landowners, consultants that have pieces of land that want them to be removed because they don't believe they are should be included.
Yeah.
And so I have encouraged them to work with the team here and to provide the necessary technical reports to demonstrate that, because if we are still to meet that time frame, an easy answer for this organisation in terms of the priorities that we have in front of us is simply to retain the status quo in terms of HPUDs and what we know with some minor variation.
Okay, so we're not in trouble? Well, we are probably in trouble, but
that runway
We'll,
to October is getting shorter and shorter.
We'll give you an update when we know.
Extensions.
Yeah.
Extensions. If they haven't got cleared, we can't have
election
cleared.
anyway, who knows?
We've got some time.
Any other questions for the team? There are none, so you're happy to move this paper? Thank you. Checking the box there. And a seconder. Thank you, Mike. All those agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carry. Kia ora. And are you staying up here, Gavin, for the next item?
Yeah,
How about-
I'll stay, yep.
So, next item is the statutory advocacy update. Once again, I'll take it as read because I'm sure you don't want me to read them word for word. Are there any questions on any of these specifically, or
Any
are we?
questions? No. Laura?
Just one question, given that the fast track list is up, would that, yeah? And you'll have a standardised sort of response
So
to
once those
the
fast track,
specific-
yep, no, that will come through here as well.
Yep, cool, nice to hear.
Any further questions? There are none. Laura, are you happy to move this paper?
I
Just
can
to
move this
receive
paper.
it. And can I have it? I'll second that. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you. Fantastic. And that's us. Koto, well done. Kia ora. Thank you all for being here, especially the work done on our decision item. I think it's at a really good place now. It probably takes a bit of pressure off the JTOG. Ka pai. Thank you. Kia ora, Mike.
Yeah, just for information, for people who don't know, the Cape Kidnappers Sanctuary is no more, and a Māori name for the Cape Kidnappers is Te Kauai or Maui, the chin of Maui, the mythical ancestor. Now, so in its place for the sanctuary, it's now to be called the Te Kauai Education Trust. And there's representatives from the three tangata whenua groups, which is at Taupunga and Waimarama, Matahiwi near Clive, and Mihiroa at Pakipaki. So representatives from each of those are on the new trust with 4 or 5 intelligent people, including Martin Williams. And so the idea will be concentrating on having educational type visits there. Similar thing to the sanctuary, except it's a new road, as it were. Martin, would you like to comment on that?
I think you've covered it pretty well, but it is a huge opportunity for getting to know one of Hawke's Bay's most significant, not only ecological but paleontological sites. A huge cultural heritage and history to it, and would be a great adjunct for our Enviro Schools program. I think it's going to be an enormously exciting resource for the region from the education side. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you for that, Pānui. And when is that going to be announced, or it has? Just now.
No. I think they've been through the hurdles. I think it's official now, isn't it?
There's now breaking news.
Breaking news.
Bye. No, very
Nobody
good
gets
news.
paid.
Very good news. Kia ora, thank you for that. Okay, we'll hand it back over to you, Mike, to close with the karakia. Kia ora.
There was it.
Just in order to help us on our return to our respective kaina. Nō reira, koutou e te whakaminenga mate atu, koutou mana ke te ake, mana mea tūna mata ke te aho hiu, kia ora koutou. Mana whakaare ake te mana watana, ake. Amene.
Amen. Kia ora, koutou. Thank you. Ka kite.
Why you shouldn't feed me